Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, and welcome to the Karey Carbaugh podcast, episode number 58. Buenas noches, damas y caballeros, chicos y chicas, niños de todas edades, y bienvenidos a el Karey Carbaugh podcast, episodio número 58. Good evening, my name is Karey Carbaugh, and this is the Karey Carbaugh podcast. Welcome. For those of you who have been with me before, welcome back. And for those who might be new, welcome. If you would, let me know whether you're watching this on the replay or whether you're watching it live by dropping the word live or an L in the comments. Or if you're watching it on the replay, drop the word replay or R in the comments. That's always helpful for me to know who's catching this when. And as always, if you would let me know where you're watching from. This is always interesting for me to see how far and wide this podcast is reaching. Some of the people I know that watch this, and some of you I don't necessarily know. So if you could let me know in the comments where you're watching from, that's always fascinating for me to take a look at. And as we're going through this podcast, if you're getting value, let me know that by dropping the word value in the comments, and I'll try to remind you throughout this episode. I'm hoping that this will be a valuable episode for many of you. Without further ado, let's jump on in here to our topic tonight. Tonight's topic, as you might notice from the description, is be prepared. Comes from an old Boy Scout motto. I was a Boy Scout. I don't know how many of you were a Boy Scout. If you were, let me know by dropping the word Boy Scout in the comments. But as a Boy Scout, we were always taught to be prepared. And the secondary title that I put on this is backup plans. Having a backup plan. And this wasn't exactly where I was intending to go with this episode, but some things happened this week, which I'll explain as we go through this, that kind of gave me the idea for this podcast. I don't mean this to be a gripe session or a complaint session, but rather an opportunity to talk about plans, talk about how plans can get derailed and how we can get them back on track, and perhaps learn from each other through this session. I've had some stumbling blocks this week that I'll explain about as we go through the podcast here. But before I do that, I'd like to, as I do on many of my podcasts, as I've mentioned before, I am a Christian believer. I believe in God. I believe in Christ. I don't force that on anyone, but I also don't hide that either. So tonight's episode, I'm not going to read from the Bible as I do many times, but I would like to reference a sermon from this past week. Though I haven't had a chance to watch the whole sermon because I was teaching Sunday school, but I was in a small group Bible study last week and kind of got an overview of the sermon. And I think there's some things about chapter 4 of the book of Nehemiah that are appropriate for this topic. So before I jump into some of my own stuff, let's take a look at Nehemiah. And again, I'm going to very, very loosely paraphrase. I encourage you to go back and read chapter 4, at least verses 1 through about 26 or 28. Looking at the Israelites returning back to Israel to build the temple after it was destroyed by the Romans. And as they returned, they knew that they were going to face adversity. And even though Nehemiah had the blessing of not only God, which is most important, but he also had the blessing of the king. And let me correct myself. I said the building of the temple. This is actually where they're building the wall around the city. But they knew they were going to face adversity. And so in preparation, in some of the earlier chapters, Nehemiah had asked when he got the blessing from the king, which he had prayed about, and God gave him the right timing to ask permission from the king to go back to Israel and rebuild the wall around the city. And because he knew he was going to face some trials and tribulations and possibly even roadblocks put in his way, governors of some of the regions trying to stop him from getting back to Israel, he asked for a letter from the king giving him permission to go back to Israel. Nehemiah was a Jew, which was also very unusual for a Jewish person to work as Nehemiah did for the king, as closely with the king. We talked a couple episodes ago about how Nehemiah was the cupbearer for the king. So he was one of the king's closest confidants, someone who actually had one-on-one time with the king. And Nehemiah used this to request permission to go back to Israel. We saw that in chapter 1 or 2, I believe it was. And so Nehemiah prepares by asking for a letter, and I can't remember if Nehemiah asked for it or if the king offered supplies, wood and materials for rebuilding. And so he prepared in advance, and he needed these preparations. He was stopped a few times on the way by people in regions that he was crossing through, wanting to know where he was going, why he was going. He didn't necessarily share that he was going back to Israel to rebuild the wall, but that he was going back to Israel. And when they tried to stop him, he pulled out this letter from the king, and he had permission. So he had prepared in advance for what he might face. And then when he got back to Israel, he's starting to build the wall, and he engaged the help of a lot of people in the region to help, many of them common, everyday people, perfume makers and other types of laborers, not necessarily construction workers. But as we see in chapter 4 here this week, Nehemiah anticipated adversity. He anticipated some of the people in the neighboring regions not wanting Israel to have a wall again, because they would then be protected from war, from infiltration, from robbery, thievery, looting, many things that they had faced before. And so they knew they were going to face adversity, and they prepared for that. They put guards up, both inside the wall, alongside the workers, and outside the wall, looking outward to stop people from coming in. Now, you might ask, if they had the guards on the outside, why would they need guards on the inside alongside the workers? Well, the verses talk about how they would have people infiltrate within the confines of the walls. They would have people that would try to foil the plan, that would come and live among them. We've seen this in recent times, where we've had people in this country come and live among us and try to destroy some of our legal systems, some of our laws. I'm not going to get political on this tonight, but we've seen where we've had people come and infiltrate us and live within in order to try to destroy some of what we have in this country. And so that's not uncommon. It's also not something of old times that doesn't exist today. People out there are trying to get us off of our game. It could be on a big scale, like they face Jerusalem, medium to large scale, or it might be on a very simple one-on-one scale. There might be people in your life who are trying to knock you off your game. We talked a few weeks ago about setting New Year's resolutions and how plans are better than resolutions, because a resolution is simply deciding to do something. Deciding for the new year that I'm going to lose weight and I'm going to go to the gym every week, twice a week or 3 times a week to lose weight. That's a resolution. But without a plan, how am I going to do that? What am I going to do if something gets in my way? What am I going to do if something comes up on Tuesday at 4 o'clock that I want to do, but I've committed to going to the gym from 4 to 5 on Tuesday? Well, you could have a backup plan. You could say, okay, if something comes up from 4 to 5, at least I'm a member of a gym that's open until 10 o'clock, or some gyms are open 24 hours a day. Maybe I can't go from 4 to 5, but I'm going to make sure that I go from 9 to 10 or 10 to 11, whatever works for your schedule. But having that backup plan in advance will help keep you from getting knocked off your game. Once again, if you're getting value from this, drop the word value and let me know that in the comments. Or if you can relate to any of this, drop the word relate in the comments. So we need to have a backup plan. How many backup plans is enough? Well, 1 is enough until you need 2. 3 is enough until you need 4. The important thing is, when you get through all of your backup plans, do you have a plan or a process to develop new backup plans? And this is where we come to some of what I've faced this week and in the past month. For me, it's been relating to transportation. As many of you know, as I've shared on some of these podcasts before, I am a person with low vision, so I can't drive. I'm legally blind. So I rely on public transportation. Well, in the community that I live in, that's a challenge. The challenges for this year started at the beginning of the year on January 3rd. The bus system in the town where I live changed. They changed all the routes. I thought they were just going to move back. They had been doing some construction where the main bus hub was, and they had moved to a temporary location. I thought they were simply moving the buses back to the main hub. No, in fact, they decided, I happen to know the scheduler, and I'm starting to reach out to them and point out how difficult they have made things for people, not just myself. Not only did they move the buses back to the main hub, which they've had for decades, but they decided to change the times of the routes. That wouldn't be terrible, except that they now no longer have buses meet up and wait for each other at that hub location. It's no longer a transfer point for buses. So one bus pulls in as another bus pulls out. And this has made it very difficult for me in the morning. Usually, if my bus is on time or a little bit early, I can jump off of one bus and jump onto the other, which makes it great on one hand because it shortens the commute a bit. But if either of those buses gets off track, if my first bus is running a little bit late, my second bus has already left. And then I have to wait for, depending on the timing and when I'm going to work, sometimes there's another bus within about 10 or 15 minutes. It's a different route. It goes a little different direction, but it gets me relatively close to the same point. Otherwise, I have to wait another half hour to an hour, depending on the timing of the routes. Some of them run every half hour, some of them run every hour. But I quickly realized that I needed to come up with a backup plan because this wasn't going to work. And so I have been trying to develop that backup plan by use of a flex ride system, which you have to book in advance. When I tried to do that a number of years ago before COVID, it took 3 years of persistence to get scheduled on a regular basis during peak hours when I needed to get to and from work. Then COVID hit and I lost my spot on the schedule, and they have fewer buses. They've shrunk the number of buses to handle even more riders than they had before COVID. So I've begun looking at alternative plans. Some of my plans include trying to get back on that flex ride, and also possibly looking at a ride Longmont, it's called, which is a call on demand service similar to Lyft or Uber, but it's subsidized, so it's less expensive. It's $2 or $1 if you're a student, a senior over 65, or a person with a disability. So the cost for that is certainly reasonable. The problem is, once again, they don't have enough vehicles, and I've found on many occasions trying to book that to go to or from work, there are no vehicles available. Which leads me to Lyft or Uber as alternatives, and those are rather expensive. They can range anywhere, depending on, during peak hours, they up the rates a little bit. They have what they call surge pricing, and so they can be $10 or $15 each way to and from work. But they are part of my overall transportation plan to and from work. And you might think, okay, that should be enough options, and one would think so, and normally going to and from work, it is. But I ran into a challenge on Sunday, coming back from church. I had gone to help with it's called Awana. It's a middle school Bible study group. And my normal plan is to use the ride Longmont, where I can call on demand when we're done, and they'll come pick me up. Well, we had a snowstorm on Sunday, and so there were no vehicles available. They were all booked up. And that service stops at 5 p.m., and I started trying at about 3:45. So I went to plan B, because I couldn't get a ride. I tried for 15, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes to try and get a ride on the ride Longmont. Flex ride, you have to pretty much book in advance, and they also stop running at 5 o'clock, so they were not an option either. I may start looking at planning those in advance as part of my contingency backup plan, as we're talking backup plans here. So I'm down to my plan B or C, which is Lyft or Uber. Well, as fate would have it, I selected Lyft first because they were a little less expensive than Uber. And I booked my ride, and it spun and spun and spun and spun and spun. I don't know if any of you have ever used Uber. If you've ever had an Uber ride timeout, or Lyft, actually this was Lyft that I tried first. If you've ever tried Lyft and wait and wait and wait for about 20, 30 minutes and have it time out on you, no vehicles available, and so then I went to Uber. I thought, well, they're a little more expensive, but at least if I can get a ride. Lyft wasn't getting me a ride, so then I tried Uber, which was my plan, I don't know, B sub 1 maybe, or plan C. And once again, it spun and spun and spun, and it timed out. No rides available. So I'm thinking, okay, what's my plan C or D, whatever we're up to here. And by this point, it was getting close enough to where the youth group was going to be ending at 6 o'clock. And a youth friend that I have was there, and his grandparents that he lives with are my normal ride. His grandmother's my normal ride to church on Sunday. So I thought, well, it's not exactly convenient or easy for her, but here I am stranded. I'll wait till youth groups gets over and check with him to see if they're picking him up and if I could get them to drop me off. Fortunately, that plan worked. That was not a plan that I had in the hopper from the beginning, but we learned to pivot. And I share this all not as a woe is me story or tale, but to demonstrate that how many plans is enough. I thought I had enough plans until I didn't. And so I was forced to go with a less than desirable. They were gracious enough. His grandfather picked him up and had no problem dropping me off at home. Excuse me. And so that ended up working out. But if it hadn't, then what would the plan have been? Or if he had not gone to youth group for some reason, then what would the plan have been? So this has gotten me thinking this week about an additional contingency plan. I had never thought about trying to book the flex ride in advance for that particular weekly trip because my ride Longmont had pretty much always worked. There'd been one other time that it hadn't worked and I was able to get a Lyft or an Uber. I can't remember, Uber, I think, for about $15, which to do on occasion is not too bad. But this has gotten me thinking about creating a better backup plan, backup system. First, the first example that I gave was work. I'm working on a more reliable backup plan for work. And now with what happened on Sunday, working on a more reliable backup plan for Sunday, for my Sunday trip that I take on a regular, normal basis. And I share all of this because although you may not have transportation needs, and I see there are some comments here, I'll take a look here in a minute and try to respond to some of those. You may not have transportation challenges, but perhaps you have other challenges in life. And maybe you haven't thought about a backup plan. Many people are starting to think of backup plans in case their power goes out. Many people in the area where I live, we had some wind back in December, and Xcel Energy turned off the power for a couple of days in some regions. And so people who live in those regions are starting to think now, maybe I need to think about a generator. Something that they'd never thought of before. Who would have thought about needing a generator when you have normally reliable power? But as they found, many people lost perishable foods. It was about a week before Christmas, so a lot of people had things that they had purchased for Christmas dinner. Maybe they were thawing a turkey that it got thawed all right, but maybe more quickly than they wanted, or more quickly than was healthy with bacteria and so forth. And so many of those people have now started thinking about backup plans for their power. Or perhaps if you find yourself in a situation where you made New Year's resolutions and you're unable to keep those, maybe it's time to look at why. What is trying to derail you? And is it something that's important for you? Sometimes things derail us from plans that really are not what we're supposed to be doing. So it's important to look at that too. We've talked about our God-given purpose. Sometimes we're getting bogged down in things that are not getting us to our purpose. And if something's trying to derail that plan, perhaps you don't necessarily need to try to figure out a way around the plan. Maybe it's time to reevaluate the goals and the plan itself. But assuming that it's a plan that is getting you toward your goals and what you've figured out or discerned is your God-given purpose, but something's trying to knock you off of that, or maybe it's health goals or weight loss goals. It's important to try to look at why is something trying to knock you off? What is it that's trying to knock you off? And what kind of plans can you develop that will help you get back on track, that will help you achieve those goals? For me, in the two examples that I gave, the goal is simply to get to and from work, or to get to and from helping with a Bible study group at church. That's the goal. That's the ultimate plan. And needing to come up with enough fail-safe alternatives that I can get to a plan D or a plan E or a plan Z if I have to. Hopefully I don't need that many plans, but if I need that many plans, at least I've got them in place. So back to one of my earlier comments, how many plans is enough? Well, enough is enough until it's not enough. And that would be kind of my whole thought for this evening. Enough backup plans is enough until it's not. Until all those backup plans are exhausted and you need one more. So are you in a position, if that happens, to think on your feet about one more backup plan? Whatever that might look like for you. Hopefully you've gotten value from this. Hopefully you're getting value from this. I'm going to take a minute. I don't know that I'll be able to go through all the comments, but I see we have a lot of comments coming in here. And so if I don't respond, I will go back and respond to them afterward, because some of them have scrolled off the screen here. And rather than trying to scroll back up to them, I'm seeing Miguel Rojas. Buenas noches. And Gabriel Mondragon. Buenas noches. And Chuy Emmanuel. It looks like Chuy's on tonight. I'm not sure he's watched one of these. But welcome. Bienvenidos. I think I'm reading the right stuff here. Here's a comment from Ernesto. Great evening to you as well, my brother. Thank you so much for tuning in. And he says, sending blessings for love and positive vibes. Thank you so much. I do appreciate that, Gabriel. And I know I'm missing some here because I know some of them have scrolled off the top, and I'm still not real proficient about trying to respond to these, but I will go back and look at them afterwards. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to try and drag this on further while I try to respond. But for all of those that have joined me here, thank you so much. I really do appreciate your support. And if you're watching this on the replay, I also appreciate your support. Sonia, here we go. Timing is so important for transportation. Yes, it certainly is. I've often used the example for friends of mine. What would you do if your car suddenly stopped working or decided it was going to take 10 minutes to start up in the morning? Most people would go out and get a new car. And sometimes that's not that easy to do, especially if you're not able to drive, if you're reliant on public transportation and other forms. I'm not seeing who this is from because it scrolled off the top, but I think that's Sonia. Welcome in, Strong Island. I appreciate you joining me tonight. And Carol Mitchell. Gosh, I haven't talked to you in a long time. Yes, it definitely was a nasty snowstorm and really cold. So definitely the church is far enough from home that I wouldn't walk it anyway. But for sure in the nasty weather like that, there was no way I was going to try and walk it. Thank you so much, Sonia, for letting me know you got value from this. And Ernesto, Sending blessings. Thank you so much, Ernesto. I appreciate that. You're kind of the one that got me started on. You're one of the ones that got me started on doing these podcasts. So I appreciate your support. I appreciate you pushing me into this. And thank you so much, Ernesto. It's good to see you as well. I watched one of your streams last week, I think it was, and it's been a while since we've seen each other in person, but it was great to see you as well. I will go back and respond to some of the comments that I missed earlier, but I wanted to at least catch a couple of those live. So thank you, everyone, for joining me. I really appreciate your support, your continued support for those that have been on this journey with me for a little over a year now. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how much it means to me. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what these podcasts are aimed at. For sure, a piece of it is self-esteem, helping to build people's self-esteem. And I think having backup plans for when life tries to foil us off of our game is definitely a part of positive self-esteem. So with that, I do hope you've gotten value from this. If you have, drop the word value in the comments. If you'd like to be added to my email list so that I can invite you to some more private events that I'm still working on but planning to start here soon, drop the word email in the comments and I'll reach out to you and get your personal email from you privately. Or you can private message me on Facebook or Instagram and let me know your email address privately if you'd like to be added to that list. And as a streamer that I follow on YouTube always says, smash that like button, like if you do. Leave me a comment down below, and we will see you on the next episode of the Karey Carbaugh Podcast. For now, this has been the Karey Carbaugh Podcast. Make it a great week. Make it a blessing to someone around you. Be a blessing to someone around you, and do something positive for someone that you come in contact with this week. Until next time, have a great week. Make it a blessed day and a blessed week. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Karey Carbaugh Podcast. Thank you very much. Good night.